You are now listening to Out of the Blank.
Welcome to Out of the Blank podcast. I'm here with Tara Smith.
Hi, how's it going?
So tell me, Tara, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm 27. I live in Sydney, Australia, and I'm doing my PhD at the moment in the field of science fiction. And yeah, I guess that's what I'm doing at the moment. I work part-time in administration. I live in an apartment with my cat and my partner, and yeah, that's
So
about it.
you said you're getting your PhD in science fiction. Now, what type are you? A writer, or are you a type of movie buff?
I'm sort of an academic with focusing on science fiction and literature, but I love sci-fi movies, sci-fi shows, games with science fiction elements. Like pretty much, it's pretty broad. But my thesis is focusing on science fiction and literature more specifically.
What exactly areas do you find fond in the scientific sci-fi literature, at least?
I'm looking at science fiction and how it can be used as social fiction. So looking at particular works with an emphasis on trying to improve the world or critique how we look at certain things and how that can be better sort of taught to people and sort of made into like public discourse rather than just always being in like a niche kind of geek sphere. How we can get it further out. That's kind of what I'm interested in.
Is it kind of related to popular culture studies?
Oh yeah, but I'm actually in the religious studies department, which is a bit weird, but that's sort of the department I'm in, and so I also focus on science fiction and religion and how science fiction works explore religion or problematize religion. But my background is majoring in religious studies.
Now, so you're from Australia. That's completely different from my area here. And now, is
Yes.
your fascination because a lot with what sounds like with sci-fi studies is about looking towards the future, but more of a utopian society type deal.
Yeah.
So,
I think I'm interested in utopias and dystopias. And so in Australia, there's not really much science fiction studies happening at all, really. It's sort of, you can't really, even in a literature course, you won't necessarily study anything to do with sci-fi. It'll mostly be focusing on more traditional literature. So it's a pretty weird and niche topic, especially because I'm in the religious studies department, which is mostly to do with like theology or Christianity, not much sort of on science fiction. So it's a bit the field, but I thought, 3, 4 years, I may as well be doing something I really like. So I picked sci-fi. That's what I'm doing.
well, it makes sense because a lot of what you see or read in like sci-fi books, it's like, wow, I wish that. Like, I remember watching the Jetsons. I don't know if you know who they are, but like
No.
that cartoon that was on TV, and next thing you know, it's like by the year 2012 we're gonna have flying cars. Well, it's 2012 and there's no flying cars.
Exactly.
So I think like that's a fascination aspect of it. I don't think it's the whole idea of like I think it's a little bit of focusing more of a progressive way towards the future. Is that a better understanding of it?
I think it used to be, and especially in America, I think sort of like you had a lot of literature, sort of like I guess like Cold War era, maybe before then, the kind of focusing on technology as being almost a positive, and then sort of with the like atomic fear of atomic weapons, it became a lot more fear of technology. And I think now that's sort of what the sci-fi today represents is a lot more like really like kind of critiquing the idea that technology is going to save us or technology's sort of redemption factor. And you get a lot more kind of moving the opposite direction and critiquing that and being afraid of the end of the world. And that's when you get the apocalypse and dystopias and stuff like that.
Well, I'm a big believer that one day technology is probably going to end up being like Skynet from Terminator, where it ends up controlling us. Mostly because I see when I go up to my buddy's house how much technology is implemented in his life now to where he's
Mm,
become very lazy. And the fact that Alexa's basically on the verge of controlling his toilet. And I see that as too much power for any machine. Um,
totally.
and
No, I get pretty paranoid about it too. I think if you read as much dystopia and all the AI robotic stuff is pretty bleak. And the idea that we could create something that has some sort of sentience that's like that's based on humans is going to be this kind of very positive and like kind of good being just seems to me really unrealistic. Like if it's like humans, it's going to be flawed like we are, I guess.
do you think that people have a fascination with technology because of how easily it's made our lives?
I don't know what it is. I mean, I use technology, but I'm still very skeptical that it's going to be this thing. Like I hear a lot of conversations around AI being sort of like specific AI, but also general AI. So specific AI is like kind of like the everyday technology using like face recognition stuff, like pretty basic. But then general AI is when you're talking about those kind of like full on robots, like that can think, feel, smell like humans. We haven't quite got there yet. And that's when you get like the singularity complex and all that sort of stuff. So people kind of think that there's going to be this AI development is going to be really positive, that this society is going to suddenly have all this spare free time, everything's going to be great, we're going to like get to read more, and there'll be all those labor jobs like factory machines and stuff is going to be taken
Well,
over.
yeah,
So
you
we're going to
remember
be
the Luddites, right? Do you know about
the
those?
what? Sorry.
The Luddites during the Industrial Revolution, there was like a
Yeah.
group of people that formed together to break machines, like factory machines and stuff, because they were taking out their jobs. The newspaper presses, all these types of things that were coming out that were literally
Mm,
back in the day of the industrial times. Like
yeah.
people barely got enough money for a piece of bread for a week. Now they couldn't feed their family because of the fact that machines were now taking their jobs from them. So
Yeah.
what they did was they literally would break up machines, and that was sparked the Luddite movement. And I think that's people see that like, oh, they were just in the past, they were uneducated. I'm like, you can see that now. A lot of people are a little bit resistant to change with technology, but it's just the common norm to be open to it. You know,
Yeah,
I
definitely.
well, I try and incorporate at least less in my life of using my cell phone. I try
Yeah.
and at least when I'm going to the grocery store, I don't see it to the point where I need to be on it while I'm in the grocery store. Like there's an option there. Like you don't want to be sitting on your phone spending an hour inside the store when you can get in 20 minutes and then get right back on it if you want. But I feel like too many people, like, tasks become a lot longer because people are just so hooked on these devices nowadays.
Yeah, definitely. And you miss out on all those kind of like micro moments in like public transport where you like actually look someone in the eye or you smile or you pass someone, like all those moments get lost. And I think people feel quite isolated because of it.
I think people are just becoming like desensitized to each other now. Like we
Yeah.
talk about a sensitive society, the world's becoming a little bit more sensitive when it comes to like, but it's not the focus. It's not like the main things we should be sensitive about. You understand?
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
the whole fact, like we're worried about someone being properly whatever pronounced correctly, whatever their gender is, and now we're doing X, Z, Zim, Zer, Zer. Like I've talked to transgender people and I've understand their point of view, and I'm open to. I try and usually fight the other side as much as I fight the side I do believe in, and
Hmm.
the reason why is I go out to the store or something, and there's a kid or an adult that bumps right into me because they were looking at their cell phone, and I'm like, I look at him, and he goes, "What?" I'm like,
Yeah.
"Whoa, excuse me? Like, you bumped into me, man. You should be apologizing to me." And then they get frustrated at you. And I see it as nobody's handling stress very well. Nobody's
Yeah.
handling anything anymore, any problems anymore. Everyone's becoming very disconnected out of each other's lives. You need
Yeah.
to have social interaction in everyday life. That needs to happen. I don't know if you've ever played the game Sims, but there's a
Oh,
thing
yeah.
called a social skill. That's a
Yep.
real thing. Okay, if you go and isolate yourself, I know what it's like. I've been introvert for a couple of years, and then I finally
Mhm.
broke out. The thing is, you become very, very compact and comfortable in your everyday life. And Netflix,
Yeah.
all these wonderful things that technology has, makes it very easy for that to happen. I think the world
Definitely.
is becoming completely isolated, much like that sense of touch. You know how your body has all these perceptions, sight,
Yeah.
whatever. Well, the sense of touch, we're losing our feeling around everything around us. We're losing the true
Yeah.
grasp of reality.
Definitely. I see that as in like the incel movement being a real manifestation of that. 'Cause one of my side interests, like as an academic, is like, and I'm sure you know the incel movement, right?
Yeah.
The I think it stands for what is it? Something celibate, where you sort of like you don't want to be celibate, but you are, and it's sort of become a sort of a very. It started, I think, in 4chan or one of those early kind of groups, and it's just grown for mostly men that are really like dissatisfied with their lot in life. They either blame genetics or whatever, and they can't get women, and then they hate women, and so then it manifests, and then you get people doing things where they're like going out and shooting people because of this kind of hatred that they have towards society and women. And I see that can disconnect and always be on your phone, always being on the internet and never connecting with real people can manifest into some really really dark kind of world views, and that's really sad because I look at these men and I'm like, you don't really know many women. Like, you can't, because if you knew women, you wouldn't have this much hatred. That's how I think. It's just so spooky. It's like, where did these people come from?
I think people end up getting a little bit full with the world today, especially feeling like
Mhm.
so disconnected. Like, you don't really have conversations with your own family anymore just because
Yeah.
it's just not a thing. You guys sit in front of the TV and just get mindless. I think we're being brainwashed a little bit. Um,
Hmm.
I love technology. I really do. It's made my life easier. Like, I wouldn't know what it would be like if someone just dropped me off in the middle of the woods and told me to survive. I probably would be dead in a matter of minutes. But I think you have to look at the factor of it has made our lives way too comfortable, where it's going to turn into the movie Wall-E, where everyone's 800 pounds floating on these giant beds or never not
Yeah.
moving anymore. Like, our bones are going to become less or more dense or less dense. And then I don't see a whole good aspect. Like, I'm still kind of worried that Skynet, like I said, was going to happen, considering that the government literally has a center for existential risk. Do you know what existential risk is?
No, what's that?
It's the idea that people are going to try and become like cyborgs and technology wise, like doing all these implants.
Oh yeah.
And I ask people this question. I want to ask you it too.
Okay.
If you could be immortal, would you choose it?
So are you saying immortal
Immortal
or immortal? It's the
or
accent. What is immortal?
either immortal or everlasting life, like you would never
Okay.
die.
Yes, I would.
Why would you choose it?
I have so much curiosity to see what the world would be like in like 100 years, 200 years. And I know that I would regret it later because I'd be like, I wouldn't be able to die and I'd be miserable and all my family would die. But my curiosity is very strong to just know, like, do we evolve into something different, or how do we change, or do we die in like 100 years? Like,
I
my
chalk it
curiosity
up. Well,
is
I
strong.
chalk it up to the movie The Last Witch Hunter with Vin Diesel. I don't know if you've ever seen this film,
I
but
think I have. It sounds
he,
familiar.
he's sitting on a bench with the young what's his name? The guy that played in the Hobbit.
For Elijah Wood?
Elijah Wood, yeah, he's sitting on the bench talking to Elijah Wood, and he's like, "Wow, what it must be like that you've lived forever," because he's cursed. And he's like,
Yeah.
Vin Diesel just looks, he goes, "I've seen the buildings built upon the battlegrounds that people have died on. I've watched loved ones come and go. I've never been able to," and he's just explaining how hard it is to watch this all happen. I'm like, you see that with any movie where someone was immortal, they want to die. They
Yeah.
literally have lived for so long. They've just seen everything. They've seen the horror it becomes. Eventually, it gets old. Now, I think one of the most easiest ways for people to become either whatever immortality and have that whole true aspect of it is sadly going to be through technology. But
Mm.
that's where existential risk comes in. You start to question, how much can you take out of yourself? How much can I remove from you and implement with technology to the point where you're still you?
Yeah, so you mean like kind of like augmenting, like having maybe like a robotic arm is maybe like the
Yeah.
most innocent part, and then that extends to like having or like an increased memory capacity due to like
Brain
chips and
chips.
stuff like that. And
But like I
yeah,
said,
that's
I
pretty
usually
scary.
try and fight the other side's point too. I am a strong person of living a Mormon lifestyle only because I can see where people take technology. I know human thinking pretty well when it
Hmm.
comes to we do some stupid shit. I am on Amazon at 2 o'clock in the morning looking at a glow in the dark light for my toilet because I'm too lazy to turn on the light switch. I know anything I do with technology is not going to benefit the whole world. So I
Mhm.
realize the common narrative for people is you get a brain chip. Okay, where I would see the beautiful aspect of being able to download Google Translate and have that on the back of your brain so you can be able to talk and understand languages better.
Mm.
Wonderful. That's the way we want to take it. But there's going to be the guys that are in the middle of class looking up porn through their gene chip and not paying attention to the education system again. That's going to happen. And I think a lot of people lose the factor of that. Everyone sees how wonderful it would be when life is
Yeah.
controlling, but we didn't know what like people didn't know what life was like before lamps at one point. I have never been in a world that didn't have a lamp, didn't have a light switch I could flick and lights came on. We used to
Mm.
burn candles, and before that we used I have no what. You just had to kind of bump into things and figure it out. But
Yeah,
it's
I think a lot of that's inevitable. Like, I think those changes are going to happen eventually. I think it's how we try to minimize the risk and have like conscious kind of discussions about it, so we feel like we can still have a say. I think trying to resist it is going to be futile, unfortunately, as much as I don't agree with it necessarily. But I think it's how we manage it and how we try and look after people through those sort of technological advancements is going to be the key, because what else can we do, right? Otherwise you just let it happen, and then 10 years down we go, oh, that was bad, and it's too late.
I feel like with progress happening so fast, it gets very, very hard for people to see the true intentions that it should be used for. And what I mean by that is, yes, this is technology is wonderful. The fact that I can talk to you and we're in two completely different continents, like that's pretty awesome. Like just having that conversation and being able to meet you, I'm already for technology. But at the same time, you have to look at what we usually will probably use it towards. We're going to use it not in the best ways for society. And I eventually think it's going to end up being a split where you don't have to get the gene chip. You don't have to get this chip that has money, whatever, logged into your arm, like that movie with Justin Timberlake. You don't have to do that. But it'd be easier if you did. It's like scanning a credit card instead of carrying cash all the time. Then
Yeah.
eventually places are going to require it. Then we're going to start separating people, and then it's going to turn into two things. It's going to turn into the people that don't want to get any implementation. There's going to be the people that are all for implementation, and eventually we're going to have split societies. Like you go over there, like they don't have teleporters over there. No, man, they still drive cars.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
What?
I mean, you can look at the same example as looking at genetic manipulation now, like that's going to become a thing soon, where people have the option to, change their genomes to be resistant to certain diseases. But like, it's a slippery slope. Like, where do you draw the line? And a lot of sort of sci-fi writers predict that you'll end up with a class distinction that is genetic. So like there's certain things that you just won't have the same genes, and there'll be no way really that you can move from without the money. Or it's not like these things are going to be given out freely democratically, where we all get the same kind of options. It's going to be private companies, like it is now with DNA testing, and that you're going to basically have to kind of pay to do it. It's going to be privatized. It's going to be the most crazy social divide you've ever seen. It's just yeah, it's crazy.
Like I said, we always talk about people saying like it's tools for the trade. It all depends on the person. That is very true. Just recently in China, they
Mm,
are now able, they were doing testing with taking out dog spinal cords and monkey spinal cords and then re-putting it back into the monkey and dog, and they could walk still. And they saw this was as major innovation for paralyzed people, being able to fix the spine by taking it out, disconnecting. Basically,
mm,
it's like brain surgery. The one thing we've never been able to really do successfully, we're now able to do. And
mm.
it's seeing giant advances for science. People that are stuck literally with inside of their body not working, you can fix it. Like that's amazing. I see that, but I also see how far, sometimes it all, like I said, it all depends on who has that power. Now, obviously, whoever gets the chip implanted in the back of their head, my buddy's all for this. He thinks the world is going to be awesome. He wants to be the first person that signed up. I'm like, but it's like you said, you're not going to be that person that gets it. It's going to be a large company. It's going to be somebody wealthy that gets it first.
Yeah.
And honestly, do you want to be the first person to get a chip in the back of your head like that? I feel like
Yeah, there's a lot of new religious movements, like Christian. There's a group called the Jesus Christians, which I think started in the States, and they're a small group in Australia, and they basically believe that the chip implanted is the symbol of the beast, and that's going to be like the first kind of reason that the apocalypse is going to happen. So I mean, they're just, as a religious studies scholar, I'm kind of interested in these kind of weird kind of new groups that pop up, and that's funny that the chip thing is something that they've always been kind of talking about being really evil.
it fascinates me. How did you go from studying religion to studying sci-fi?
Well, I wrote my sort of master's thesis on Frank Herbert's Dune. I don't know if you know it at all. It's
I
like
don't.
it's a pretty famous science fiction work, kind of like a space opera, I guess, like Star Wars, set on like a desert planet. But anyway, I looked at the eco-religious themes in that book. So, and then I decided to kind of broaden it out to science fiction more generally. But I still have a very big interest in conspiracy theories and new religious movements, and they're kind of like areas of interest of mine. I write a fair bit about David Icke. I've written a couple of papers on his conspiracy theories. Do you know David Icke?
I don't know David Icke, but I know a lot of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, he's the reptilian guy. He kind of made the reptilian stuff popular. So the idea that there's
Explain that one to me. I have not really dived into that one that much. That
I'll do the
people are
best
all
I can.
reptilian aliens or something, or aliens are reptiles.
It's pretty complex. I'll try and do the best version I can. It's because it's been a while since I looked back at it, and you kind of get in the rabbit hole every time you start to either watch a video of David Icke or you read something. It's like kind of trying to like you kind of like believe it for a little bit. You kind of like following it along, and then he gets like hits you with something crazy. And you're like, hang on a second. So it's like basically reptilian thesis is that there's an ancient bloodline called the Anunnaki, which is an alien bloodline, and they've spliced human DNA with their own DNA to create the Brotherhood, which is basically a sort of I guess, reptilian, semi-human version of people that have all of these webs interconnected, and they manipulate all of society to do things a certain way because they feed off negative energies, and that's how you can see shape-shifting politicians and things. So basically, David Icke believes that the Rothschilds and certain politicians are these reptilians, and they can only be in certain planes, like dimensions at certain times. That's why you can see them shimmer into their reptilian sort of and non-reptilian phase. That's pretty much the summary. It's pretty bonkers. I don't believe in any of it, but I find it very interesting that so many people do believe it, especially in America.
I think people take us like a conspiracy theory and they choose to believe in that, like the same thing with the flat earth. I think
Mm,
when I look at religion, I like to think we all have a pieces of the puzzle. If you look at Egypt, they had a fascination with the body's afterlife. You know, we have a in Christianity, we have a form of that too. I'm not religious. I mean, I'm an ordained minister under the Church of Bacon. Yeah, the
yeah,
Church of Bacon, just because it was a safeguard for atheists. It was an idea that if you didn't have a certain religion, you shouldn't be prosecuted for it. So why don't you just join the Church of Bacon? I saw
yeah.
that. I think anybody can take deep meaning out of something like
Mm,
Pastafarianism, all these parody religions. I have a fascination with because
me too.
a lot of people see it as they're creating a joking manner and making fun of the main religion. I'm like, but don't you should highlight the aspect that it's ridiculous for everyone to believe in the same thing. What makes
Mm.
us unique is that we have a beautiful understanding and different workings of our minds.
Yeah, no, definitely. And then there's, I think that, the UK is that they have the Sunday Assembly, which is basically like an atheist church. So you go, you have like humanistic ceremonies and everything. And it's set up like a church sermon, but it's all for atheists and humanists because I think there's a certain value in that community aspect, even if you don't believe in like the kind of typical religion. I've got a very broad definition of religion that includes things like civic religion, all pretty much any kind of thing where you gain meaning and it's your ultimate concern. That to me is could be considered religious.
I think a lot of times, like, it's really weird where we're seeing society adopt to new things. I think
Mm,
a lot of it's bad and a lot of it's really, really good too. I'm
mm,
I like seeing that, like, I'm not saying I don't like Christianity, but I like seeing how it's not the dominant religion anymore. Like if,
mm,
back in the day, like let's say 20 years ago, there was not that many religions that were known here, at least. I mean, we knew about them like in history or something, but they weren't as common as it is nowadays. Now you ask someone about Christianity, they're either say I'm not religious or like the community's hurting, the Christianity community. There's still
mm,
the people that follow it a little bit, and there's still people that have a hardcore belief in it. And I would never change their minds on it. I would try and understand it, and I'm glad that they have something they can believe in. But at the same time, I've witnessed Jehovah's Witnesses, and this is why
mm,
I wanted to go and get a philosophy major, was because I was walking in my local town and a Jehovah's Witness is talking to random strangers. He goes, "You, sir, going to hell if you don't believe in Christ." I'm like, hold on a minute. Now, this is where my fighting side comes out of me, more like the point, like I need to figure out why you think this way. Not really just trying to argue, but just trying to understand. And
mm,
so I walked up to him and was like, "So tell me why you like believe this." And he's like, "Well, it's the main." He's like, This is what we're like. There's a book on it," and starts showing all these things. I'm like, "But there's a lot of flaws. You understand that book was created by a man too, right?" And he goes,
mm,
"Yeah." And I was like, "And you admit there's mistakes in history, right?" "Yeah." And I'm like, "And the commandments are also kind of telling you what to do, not really suggesting things for you to do, right?" And he goes, "Yes, but they're guidelines or rules we need to follow by." I'm like, "But if you really look at that, and then you look at laws of humans, like, don't speed, don't drive, don't do these are things that are implemented for safety reasons, but it's also with like it was created by a person." The whole
Mm.
reason we think of it as a safety thing and look at it as a law, but if you really look down to the true aspect of it is it was created by somebody, and how could their judgment on safety be the thing that we all go by? Who's to say that
Definitely.
driving a little bit faster, if you know how to drive, isn't safer than going slow behind someone that isn't? Like I said, it's all about understanding the other side's point of view. And a problem I face with talking to religious people is they have a hardcore set in their ways. And my whole opinion, like I'm very open-minded to everything. I would love it if like God was real. I would love it if anything like that was real. But I haven't had that experience yet. You know what I mean? I have
Yeah.
not truly came to that understanding yet. And that'd be cool if one day it happens. If I get to the pearly gates or whatever. But I always chalk it up to what Jim Gaffigan said, where he says, I don't know if you know who Jim Gaffigan is, American comedian.
Mm-mm.
Well, he talks up, he goes, "Oh, wait, I'm gonna pop up at the pearly gates? You're telling me heaven is a closed community? What is like it keeps the kids out of the pool?" And like he's joking like that. I'm like, it's true though, because you start looking over a lot of stuff. Like my cousin read um he read the Bible, he read everything from either like Islamic religions, whatever I forgot what they call their book.
Quran?
Yeah, he read the Quran and he studied it all extensively. And like, we have a podcast that we did called Philosophy, like Uneducated Philosophers, because me and him both think the same way when it comes to understanding religion and understanding things. Because
Mm.
we believe it's all getting pieces of the same puzzle. Everything that every religion talks about hits very closely related. It's all about really caring for one another and not causing harm to others, which I believe is a giant thing in human nature, and it's on our minds constantly, but everyone is completely oblivious of it. We don't choose to follow that true human nature to care about one another.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think religion, I used to be a very angry atheist back in the day. So when I first started my religious studies major, I was someone that watched a lot of debates of like Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and was just like really angry. And I had to really just, as soon as I started like learning more about different religions and I had to just kind of mellow out and just kind of be a bit more accepting and realize that just because I don't agree with other people's journey doesn't mean that what they're doing is wrong, and try to have more conversations with people, because I think atheists can fall in the trap of being almost as militant and as aggressive as fundamentalist Christians or really religious people as well. And so I think it's important to keep an open mind, keep the dialogue open, and I think that's the same for everything really. So what I've tried to do now is learn about other religions and learn about things that, especially the things that I go, nobody could believe that. They're the ones that really get me going. Like, that's why I love conspiracy theories. I'm like, nobody could believe in reptilian, shape-shifting aliens. Like, how can you believe that? And so I love talking to people that believe this sort of stuff, not to ridicule them, but to just try and get their perspective of how this makes sense.
What conspiracy theories do you find that you're most belief in, or some that you find are really, really like awesome?
I don't know. I like the reptilian alien stuff because I totally get it. Is if you look around in society now and you think, how the hell did we get here? And especially, this kind of how we're living now, it makes sense. It makes more sense that there's reptilian brotherhood kind of pulling on the strings and trying to make the world a certain way than to just say we fucked it up, right?
Yeah.
There's so much easier because it's giving you a reason to something that doesn't really have a lot of answers. It's just bad. We're just human nature. It's just kind of bad luck. So that like makes so much sense. And I think that's where a lot of conspiracy theories help people. It gives them a feeling of control that if they just knew about these kind of intricate plots to do with this, then at least they'd have a reason behind things that really just don't have any reason. And
I
so
think it's a lot like we have a fascination with mystery. The
yeah.
fact, like people are they love that there's curiosity, but they understand like they don't sometimes you truly don't want to know the answer. I chalk up like you hear what's going on with Area 51 in the States.
Yes.
A
Yeah.
bunch of people running
I'm
up.
on the same. I see the Reddit memes and stuff. It's pretty funny.
I tell people, I'm like, look, you don't understand. You're gonna get shot. Doesn't matter what's in Area 51. They don't want you to know it's there for a reason, so don't even try going in there. I
Do you
like
honestly think people are gonna rock up? I don't believe it for a second.
No, I don't. I think it was a giant like joke. thing, it turned into this giant spark. And then now I think people are actually going in full belief. Like there's going to be a bunch of people showing up like, where's everybody at? I thought there were supposed to be like 700,000 of us all running up here. There's only 10 people. And then like,
There's no way is that anybody going to show up at Area 51. I just don't think.
we'll see that like Area 51 took extra precautions now. What they did was they bought up all the land mass around it so no one can get anywhere near it.
Really, I didn't know that. It's pretty funny.
Yeah. Well, people have taken videos of trying to show up there and the government telling them to turn around. They don't have any jurisdiction there. The fact is, the government does some shady, shady stuff.
Yeah.
It's not just America's governments, Russia's, it's Australia's. We used to do a project that was known as conspiracy theory back in the day. I think conspiracy theory is just another term of evidence that hasn't come to light yet.
Really? Like for all of them? Like, come on.
No, I mean not the reptile one, obviously, but a lot with like government experiments that are going on. These types of,
Yeah.
I think a lot of that is when it comes to conspiracy theory. I think a lot more is belief into it, but I think it's also the same factor you have to chalk into like if you tell one kid something and they go and whisper it down the line of like 50 kids, by the time it gets
Yeah.
to the last kid, the whole story has completely changed from what it's originally was. So
Yeah, definitely.
like Australia, for instance, did the same thing we did, and it was against a human ethics code where we used to take people's dead bodies of their loved ones, and we used to dig them up without telling them, and we used to test radiation on them. It was called Project Sunshine. That was known as a conspiracy theory, and the government would in no way do that. Well, Australia had to pay a bunch of fines to people, had to pay a bunch of debt that basically to reimburse people for sorry for digging up your dead grandfather and testing radiation on his bones. And also the fact people talk about abortion, and they talk about that sensitive subject. We were taking babies that were telling the parents that their babies died and taking that baby that maybe it might have had a disease that wasn't going to live that long and getting its cells, getting its like using it for testing. We tested radiation on its bones. We did all these sorts of things. And that's not just America. That was Russia. That was Japan.
Mm.
Japan had a biomedical tissue services where they used to pick up 50 people every month out of their town and other neighboring towns and test on them.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely some conspiracy. I mean, there's conspiracy theories that have been true, but I mean, what do you think about like ones that are obviously causing a lot of harm, like anti-vaxxers? Like, what are you kind of like? Don't you think that this total mistrust of the government, while sometimes granted, is also creating a rift of people that are not turning to doctors or scientists? They're thinking, well, what do they know? I can Google that and find like 10 bits of evidence to say. Like, what do you kind of think about that?
I think with vaccinations, a lot of people like I got into an argument with my buddy who's all for science. He considers himself a scientist. And it's funny because my cousin kind of thinks the same way, but likes to fight the philosophy side too, because he has a belief that like, I don't know, in human nature and the kind of the mysticisms of the world. And then we're all
Hmm.
sitting here talking, trying to have a chat, and I'm just hearing my buddy spout so much information. That does make sense. I think you can sway anybody to your side of view, especially if you talk reasonably and use a lot of evidence as well. But like I chalk it up to understanding with vaccinations. We have done it before. The government has done it before. We have made it sick, people sick with like Tuskegee syphilis experiments. We were injecting people with Tuskegee viruses. We were injecting people with AIDS. We were injecting people with all these types of things, syphilis, just to see what happens to someone. But the problem is we did it with people that did not look like us. The weird thing that people don't believe it now is with the history of what we've done with actually using these types of vaccinations and things that was known as a cure but really was giving them the disease. Like I don't know if you've ever heard of Westbrook or yeah, it's Willowbrook High School. Basically
Mm.
it was a high school in Willowbrook that was basically like a mentally disabled school. And this was back in the time when parents that had a mentally disabled kid, a lot of them didn't know what to do because a lot of evidence did not like they didn't know how to treat them, they didn't know how to care for them as well. So the parents would literally just open up the door, tell these kids to get out, and then push them off and never check on their kids again. Well, their whole climate, environment, everything, there was it was supposed to only hold 3,000 students. It ended up holding 6,000 something. They were all
Oh God.
naked. They weren't showering. And when they would shower, it'd be once a week. And there would be 11 of them in the room. Like there's pictures that you can look up, and they're just naked standing there, like disconnected. Like they're not taken care of properly. They were injecting
Yeah.
them with hepatitis.
Oh God, that's horrible.
And they did that because the old hospital, or it used to be an old hospital, an army hospital. So basically 90% of the time, or 90% of the people that went there got hepatitis because the place was not properly sanitated. It was still had hepatitis in it. They were using old rusted things from back before when it was an army hospital, using that as their medicine there too. And
Yeah.
then eventually they use that, like, oh, well, people get it anyway, we might as well start testing them. And they started testing them. I say when you look at that and you look at where vaccinations are today, it's really, really hard for people to believe that they're going to affect the common man. And I'm like, but it's in human nature to want to understand more. And sadly, understanding doesn't have limits when it comes to as what we care about, human ethics. We have a human ethic code for a reason, but nobody ever seems to follow it. They seem to kind of bend the rules or cut corners in a way.
Yeah, I don't know if that's necessarily true because my partner works in like science field and I've also had to go through ethics just to be able to do like interview science fiction writers, and it was like a really lengthy process where a board meet and they discuss it. And that was just me interviewing people. And if you are doing any sort of medical trials, you have to go through really, yeah, like big processes of, several different ethics committee meeting. You have to work out, you have to have like a 30-page document how you're going to minimize risks. And it's not like you can just decide to do crazy stuff.
Oh, I
It
don't
needs to,
believe I don't believe the average man can. I don't believe the average woman can either. I don't believe that the average person, scientist, whatever, can break the rules like that. But I believe you got
mm,
enough money, you got enough power, enough people, you can blur those lines a little bit, especially with, if the Nuremberg trials for the Nazi scientists, all
yeah,
those people that got off because they were able just to give us all their research, and then we totally forgive them for all their crimes against humanity.
yeah,
There
that's
was
really horrible.
only like 12 of the doctors out of the 28 that were on trial that got prosecuted, and that's because they wouldn't give up any information that was relevant to us. But we took that and we're like, all right, you're forgiven, and then we incorporated them into our society. I see that.
Is this so you're saying this is the mistrust of why people are anti-vaccine, anti-vaxxers now?
I think the problem is people, like I said, a lot of evidence and a lot of information gets blurred. Like, especially when it comes to the medical field, a lot of people have problems with big pharma, these types of things that get people addicted to drugs, especially in like our country, is the fact,
Mm,
like, they're literally giving you legal dosage of meth, but you're not going to take it if they prescribe it as meth. You're going to only take it when they give it a fancy name like myethyltryptamine. You take that, it's like, oh my God, but really it's meth. Like if a doctor said, here's some meth, you're not going to take it. All right. It's like, oh, it's back pain, but it doesn't hurt that bad. But it's like, you look at that, and in my area, there's people suffering from opioid addiction. There's kids that are getting pills when they're 3 or 4 years old because they have ADHD. I had ADHD
yeah,
when I was young, and I was lucky enough that my parents didn't put me on a prescriptive medicine, you know?
yeah,
And going through school, it was tough for me, but I learned how to adapt, and I learned how to focus it, and I learned how to channel it in
yeah.
better ways. But I think,
Definitely. I can understand like what you're saying that there's flaws in like certain systems and that, that the medical and the pharmaceutical companies aren't always telling the truth. But don't you think that it's dangerous to kind of say, well, just because in this scenario, we're overdosing kids on ADHD medication, it then means that we should be avoiding vaccinations. I mean, like vaccinations are so important.
oh,
I
oh, oh,
myself,
oh, oh, I
yeah.
see what you're saying. No, I don't think, I mean, if you want to get a vaccination, go get a vaccination. If it helps, it helps. But I think it's not out of the realm of possibility when people do bring it up. Like, am I in full belief that there were medically making people sick with vaccinations? No. But I also haven't gotten a flu shot in a while, and I don't know. So I'm not in that realm anymore. So when people go and get vaccinated, and if they do feel better, they feel better, I mean? Or if they don't get sick, they don't get sick. I don't know. But I say,
You don't think it's
it's,
dangerous to have children like getting chickenpox and things when they could have just had the vaccination? And there's children that
oh
can't get
yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah. You should be totally
Terrible.
ready for like, you should be, first of all, if you can provide, or what would it be? If you could totally take out any type of sickness like that that could happen, and take out any chance of that possibility of that happening, that's wonderful. It's the whole reason why we don't have the Black Plague and all these other types of things that are going on.
Okay, so you're not an anti, like you're not
No,
like
no.
a
I let people make the decision for themselves, but like I said, I try and understand both sides of the spectrum. Like
yeah,
I
no,
don't
definitely.
I don't stick firm in my beliefs. I'll sway back and forth depending on understanding someone. I'm gonna know what I'm gonna run with, whether if God's real or not. I'm gonna whether know if, history has shown me that people have been sick from vaccinations, but also if vaccinations work too. That's not that's not there. There's evidence of that. So when I look at that, I'm not pro for it and I'm not against it. I'm like, if you want to go get vaccinated, go get vaccinated. That's your choice and your decision. I have a problem when people start letting other people know, like, you're ridiculous if you don't get this. You're ridiculous if you're going this. It's like, okay, well, that's that person's road to walk. The problem.
Yeah, I know, but it affects other people. I guess what I have problem with it, like I'm all for people like being able to choose what they want and everything. But I mean, if it's sort of going to affect and make other people sick and things like that, I mean, like where do you draw the line? I mean, there's certain rules we have to do in a society. I guess where do you draw the line between kind of, it's sort of like, I don't know, it's very complicated. And I think that don't you think you could go kind of too far, like in just letting everybody do what they want to do? I mean, there's certain rules in society for a reason.
Oh yeah, like we have to wear clothes for a reason. I can't just go to the store naked.
Yeah.
But I also look at, like, it comes to some things, like, getting vaccinated. I do believe you should. I do think if, you can prevent something, especially your child, like coming from a parent's perspective, you don't want your kid to ever feel any pain. So that's a major thing. And also, if you're an adult and you get sick like that, then you can contaminate a whole entire population. So seeing it also from a city type of view. But I also, like I said, I try and fight the other perspective too. The same reason why, if you said you like toast, I say I like toast. You say you like toast with butter on it, I say I like toast with butter on it. Then that's it. But I still have to fight the other side. Like, yeah, but sometimes toast is really, like, difficult to
Yeah,
make.
you're playing devil's
Sometimes.
advocate. I understand.
Yeah, and I don't mean it to just be argumentative. I just like to try and bring in all possible realities, kind of understand both sides of the spectrum. Like, my aunt is a spiritualist, okay? I didn't
Mhm.
understand what that was. I thought that was completely nonsense. She goes onto the beach, does, like, makes wands and does these types of chants and seances. That seems ridiculous. And I laughed at first too. Then after podcasting with her, I went and experienced it myself, and I understand it. I get it. It's her it's her ways, it's her things. The reason why we're so different is, I think the problem with vaccinations and things is, you tell people what to do and they're naturally going to want to fight back.
Yeah,
So,
no, definitely. And I don't think banning, like in Australia, there's a few areas like where basically it's law that your kids get vaccinated. You have a lot of people around the kind of really alternative hippie areas that really rebelling because that kind of dialogue is not reaching them. If you go, well, you legally have to do it now, or we won't give you, they don't give you then subsidies, like they don't give you childcare support if you don't do it. So it's pretty much you either do it or the government kind of stops giving you money for certain things. So they kind of like have them forced to make that decision. And a lot of them are just totally rebelling because it's stopping the dialogue. It's not going to them, having a conversation with them, going, okay, well, what sort of things? Why are you afraid of? Let's talk about vaccinations and why are they useful and etc. They're just saying, well, you either change and it's making it worse because, of course, the anti-vaxxers are going, well, that's exactly what the government would do if they did have these regimes or something. You know what I mean? So it kind of feeds into the fears, really, when the government tries to crack down on it like that without using the same dialogue or talking to someone at their kind of understanding. Does that make sense?
yeah, it does. And I think it also, like, what's going on nowadays with the 5G network that's going on. People think
Mm.
that it's making their kids sick, like it's experiencing mental health problems and these types of, like, side effects. Like, a kid's like, apparently there was like a couple kids that got, like, really, really, like, severely sick from it, like got nausea. It also, like, if you're around it too long or something, it creates some type of like, just affects your sleep, affects so many different things. I'm like, now, I'm looking at both sides here. One, there is a type of frequency that your phone right now is sending up to the sky right now, in an invisible signal that you cannot see. That light
Mm.
switch that's getting there's something wired up into that, and it is sending an impulse that can possibly affect your nervous system. I believe like the fact that we can hack a Tesla and crash it can kill somebody. It's not out of the realm of possibility. You know the little Wi-Fi booster signal things you can plug into a wall outlet, and it boosts the signal in that specific area of your house where it's lacking.
Hmm.
I chalked it up to what I was fueled on coffee and shrimp in my Christmas Day podcast. Was the whole fact is I can see somebody hacking that little Wi-Fi signal, sending out an electrical impulse like an EMP type thing that can shut down someone's nervous system and knock them out in their own house. That's where I want to go live a Mormon lifestyle. But I realize eventually technology is going to get to the point where, trees, all these types of things have a type of wavelength, have a type of thing that can communicate to each other. They seem to be like thinking a little bit, like at least when it comes to, hey, there's a certain bug that's eating our leaves. Let's change our flavor of our leaves or release a toxin to kill these bugs so they'll stop eating us and killing us. I see that like a special trees in Africa that have that type of thing. And I chalk it up to Avatar where everything's connected through the roots. I'm like, that makes sense. But at the same time, if I go to try and live a Mormon lifestyle, they could eavesdrop on me through a tree by connecting into the freaking central nervous system of a tree. And I'm like, that sounds ridiculous. But like I said, it's I see this stuff and I'm like, it's possibilities in a world where we have a fascination with exploring other planets. The fact people before were like, you're going to land on the moon? You're going to put a man on the moon? That's ridiculous. Well, it happened. Now, I like to chalk up to the conspiracy theory that we also didn't get to the moon. Like, I'm not saying we never landed on it, but we didn't get to the moon as we said we did. We did it like a little bit later. I think it was a giant propaganda act to tell people like, hey, Russia, we made it on the moon. Sorry, bro. That whole scene they did, the video and everything. And then we actually did get there, but it was a little bit later. And then Russia was like, shit, they already made it to the moon. We lost the space race.
Yeah. Is there any conspiracy theory you don't believe in?
Most
Or
of
you
the-
don't like kind of concede the side, or what do you want to like believe in a little bit, or whatever you want to call it?
I think the conspiracy theory, like flat Earth, that one's really hard for me to believe. I don't believe in Scientology. That one, I'm sorry, that's the one thing I will say I don't like.
But Scientology isn't a conspiracy theory. Scientology is a religion.
Yeah, but everything that guy created was a works of science fiction, and then he decided to make a religion, and then everyone's like, wait a minute, this guy that's given all this false, fake story type, like literature and everything, but he said Scientology, so we have to follow that. That's real. I try and look at that. I'm like, everything he's ever created, every work he's ever created has been basically like a giant fake bullshit story. And then you're going to
Really?
follow
I don't believe that L. Ron Hubbard's all his stuff that he's written is false. I think he believed it. I mean, he was a science fiction writer up to a point, and then he wrote some science fiction, but he wrote over like 200, 300 works of nonfiction that are all to do with his philosophy and his beliefs. Dianetics is a very like complex theory based on basically psychology, where it's a lot of just talking and talking about your feelings and talking about past traumas and how those past traumas are impacting the choices and decisions that you're making now. So like it's pretty simple kind of like talk therapy that what happened was L. Ron Hubbard wrote all these books and then sent them out to all these psychologists and psychiatrists and said, look at this technology I'm looking at. And they laughed in his face and he said, well, I guess I'll try it as a religion. And that's essentially what he did. But I think he was sincere in thinking that some of those things and that the therapy he was doing would help people. I'm not saying that I agree with Scientology. I know that they do some very shady shit to some people. I mean, they are horrible to people that leave. They chase people.
They isolate people from their families. They put one sides against each other. That's where I don't really like. But you also are, right now in this podcast, the way you're talking to me, you're helping me understand L. Ron Hubbard a little bit. Where I'm not. I mean, I know a little bit about like what I've heard and experienced from other people, and I've seen Scientology, and I've like heard accounts of people that are like don't talk to their family anymore. One of my favorite actresses, Leah Remini, she came out about Scientology, and they do some stuff. $8 million to get a trophy or a medal. Like you get something for that for donating it to the Church of Scientology. That's a little bit ridiculous, but
there's definitely aspects of it that are maybe different. But I mean, there's a lot of religions now that have a very high economic concept where you tithe a certain amount of your money to it. And I think what's happened is Scientology has sort of emerged and it's very new and it's still trying to work itself out. Like the church in Australia, I think is quite different to the one in the States. I know Mick Scabbage, or the head at the moment of Scientology in America, he's pretty insane. And I think that there's aspects of it that are really scary and horrible, but there's people that genuinely believe it, that go every day, they volunteer their time, they believe in Dianetics, they believe that they're going to reach OT level 3 and be able to control matter and work their way up the bridge to total freedom. And they believe that. And I've met them and they're nice and they tell me what they believe. And I find it hard to say that there's anything different than any other religion, really. And it has its problems, but you looked at any religion as it was created, thousands of years ago, had its schisms, it had its problems happening, had people dissenting, and the thing is, we just got to remember, like, it's really new, it's just starting and it's trying to work itself out. It's not going to be perfect, and there's aspects of it that are weird, but I think at the core it's not evil or bad, it's just learning it as it goes.
You think it's like it's taking the steps, it's kind of learning how to walk.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that we can't just judge a religion because it has a high money focus. I think that that's just not enough. I mean, we can judge because there's certain people in it that are bad, or members in the group that are doing bad things, but it doesn't mean the whole religion itself can be kind of labeled as bad. I think that there's plenty of people that really find a lot of meaning in it.
See, this is why I like podcasting, because now I'm understanding Scientology. I'm starting to hating it a little bit less. I still don't like Tom Cruise, but
yeah, no, and I'm not a member at all, because I
you have a whole other perspective, especially being in like sci-fi studies. You have another perspective, at least for Scientology, that I don't know about, and I'm listening to it and I'm understanding more. Like I said, I'm all about understanding. I'm not making justifications or claims on anything, even though what I might believe, I still want to see the other side's point of view too. I think a lot of what people chalk up with Scientology, where they start hearing things like, for me, listening to Leah Remini, and hearing all that sad stuff, and then listening to another guy that was on like a Joe Rogan podcast, and hearing that, and hearing him talk about how he doesn't talk to his kids anymore. He's never met his grandkids. And I'm like, holy shit, they completely isolated you. And then I hear that it's kind of like a watchful eye type thing. And then I hear that, and then I hear about Operation Snow White. It was like a stupid, like, criminal conspiracy theory by the Church of Scientology. I think it was like in the 70s or something, and it was supposed to just like take out anything saying anything bad about Scientology or its founder, L. Ron Hubbard. Like, I heard that, and I was like, it was supposed to be like a series of like break-ins and all these things on 100 and like something government agencies, foreign embassies and stuff like that, and like all these private stuff that had all this information about Scientology, talking shit on it. And I'm like, that I hear that one that happened, and then like it was hard because they were talking about like wiretapping, and I'm like, government does that too, like, come on. And then you hear about Operation Snow White, and then it goes to Operation Freakout, that woman that came out, the US author, Paulette Cooper, she was imprisoned to a psychiatric hospital, and that was all like a developed plan under the Church of Scientology, because she was taking action under, like, basically blasting out the church, saying you're a scandal, wrote all these books. And then the FBI ended up getting involved and seeing all her documentary stuff about this, like, after she was like incarcerated into
I know how flawed like they are and problems they've made, and like I get all that.
That's not their fault either. That's also a thing of on education too. You know what I mean? I think the best, I'm not talking about education by book smart. I'm not talking about any of that stuff, because books can be wrong, let me tell you. But I think also it's experience. It's understanding. It's, the reason why I look at my old podcast and look at my podcast now, my mind's only increased in power. Knowledge is experience. You know what I mean?
They do a lot of, what's interesting, they do a lot of advocacy, especially in Australia, for mental illness, in a way that they're pretty like antidepressants and heavy kind of drugs. They kind of believe that there's no real, and this is like, I'm not saying this is good, but it is quite, I don't know if I agree, but they kind of believe that each mind is individual. And so the idea that anybody could have a real mental illness is kind of debatable if each mind's kind of individual. They do a lot of advocacy about some weird tests and things. Like, I don't know the full details, but I think, maybe in like the 60s or 70s, there was some weird tests being done, mental illness tests, and they actually fought for it in the courts to kind of get certain mental institutions that were bad to be kind of dismissed and taken down. And so there's an interesting side that you probably don't hear much about, and also you don't really ever get to hear people that are happy in the church. They don't come and go, we're going to do like an interview now and tell you how great it is. And if you did, you might not even believe it. So I guess it's hard for them to get even positive information out when they have such a bad reputation as well.
Yeah, I think like, it like America, like with history here, you hear about all the good stuff Christopher Columbus did, but you don't hear about the real bad shit that he did to get to what happened and made this country today. We're built on a rocky foundation. I think every country has a really rocky start because they decided to take what was known as the immediate answer and the fastest answer than taking sometimes the long, hard route, which is less harmful. But like we said, history is written by the winner. So, nobody's going to talk shit on themselves in a book, at least. I think where technology is awesome is that it lets you expand your mind out to all these resources of information to expose these types of things that, opens up your mind to stuff that was not looked at before. The fact I learned about night witches, which was a group of women in Russia that were flying in crop dusting airplanes, like the open ones, during wintertime in the middle of night, freezing cold in an open airplane in Russia. And they were dropping bombs on Nazi soldiers. I hear that. I'm like, holy crap. Like that's amazing. There's more power to women and more power to people. But we don't know about that because that's in Russia's history. That's not in ours. There's things about Australian history that there's wonderful things that's way better than the United States. But when you're confined and you're in a place like a country like the United States, everything that's considered foreign isn't really as appreciated as something that we do ourselves. And
no, Australia's got the same problems. I mean, like I think it might just be less known, but I think Australia is as equally as kind of does that as much as the States.
And I think one conspiracy that was like back in the day when we were discovering with the moon, I do have like, I didn't really believe that we would ever think to do, but we actually tried to do Project A119. I don't know if you've never ever heard of this. And it's the fact we tried to launch a nuclear weapon at the moon to show how powerful we are.
Wow, I didn't know that. I don't know. All these sort of stuff, like you've got a good memory to even remember all these different conspiracy theories.
Well, I used
to
do a spin-off series of this podcast called Fill in the Blank, and we focused on specific topics for like 30 minutes. And my buddy's like, I'm into conspiracy theories. I was like, all right, I don't know what conspiracy theories are. And then next thing I know, I'm like diving deep into the realm, like, bro, this shit's real. This shit's real. And I'm pulling out all these articles. He's like, bro, he goes, dude. And we're sitting here talking about it and looking up the evidence, like facts on like different sites and trying to pull everything that's correct about it and everything that's, where it seems to be flawed. And I'm like, it's all about understanding, but let's talk about it and let's make it fun. So it makes it interesting to us as well.
Yeah, no, I think they're always fun topics. But I also, when I'm thinking about conspiracy theories, I always also try and think like sometimes like if it's super complicated, convoluted, it's not always the way. Like, I think there's this sort of idea that there's these 10 steps for this thing to happen, and sometimes it's just a lot more of a simple explanation. Or I think it's easy to kind of get wrapped up into the intricacies, and sometimes that and also the idea that there's these evil people. That's what I don't like about conspiracy theories. That there's this idea that there's like evil corporation rubbing its little hands together just to kind of fuck the world. And I kind of get that's the impression with the reptilian stuff, like where it's like, oh yeah, there's this undercurrent of this evil organization just trying to like ruin everything for us. And I don't always think that's correct. So I guess I'm a bit like, not like, I know the world's flawed, but I also don't think that there's people there that just are kind of evil rubbing their hands together. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a lot of times you chalk up like conspiracy theories or something like that. You always think of like, I don't know if you know Alex Jones is. You hear that guy.
Exactly.
And so what I did was in a podcast he was in with Joe Rogan. It's like a 3-hour long podcast. He's just ranting off kind of like how I was going all these different things of information and stuff, like just saying a bunch of stuff. But like he wasn't clarifying, and Joe Rogan was trying to get him to clarify for a minute what he was talking about. And he was talking about how his mind is like a river. It's constantly flowing to different things, constantly looking for another window to hop into. I heard that. So I decided every 5 minutes during his rants, I would stop, pause, and listen to what he actually said. I looked up half of this stuff that were considered conspiracy theories. The Jedi program. You ever seen that movie, Men Who Stare at Goats?
Yes, I have.
Okay. That's a real government program, and it happened an hour from where I was from. My
Really?
mom didn't believe it. She goes, I went to that high school. I was like, Mom, this is a real government experiment that happened in like 19, like that's real stuff. But they incorporated it into a funny movie. And then I see the movie as a kid, and 10 years later I find out it was all real shit. My whole mind was blown. I was like, oh my God, like really? And the fact that our space program was all part of Operation Paperclip. The fact that Russia, Japan, America, they all got Nazi scientists. They split them up. The reason they called it Operation Paperclip was they had paper clipped files onto their shirts. Oh, you're part of the space program. Well, did you know that a lot of America's space travel and a lot of our NASA program, like the little white shuttle that you think of when you think of NASA, that's all Nazi invention?
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. These are stuff that if that I would want to look and find like peer reviewed like papers. Like I don't know, like what do you take as evidence for this sort of stuff?
Well, I mean, this is all facts now. Like you can look up. The weird part is we have a thing called Freedom of Information Act, but it only
Yeah.
comes out 20 years after the person dies. Anybody that was involved into the program. I don't know if you've ever heard of Unit 731, but
I haven't.
there's like I said, there's weird stuff, and I can go on
I
and
bet
off.
you have a conspiracy theory for everything. Like there would be some like project that you could link to almost everything.
Well, I mean, I'm not using that as sufficient evidence to suffice, like saying that people are getting vaccinated with poisons and stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, like, people always say, like, when you compare someone to being like the devil, usually people say, he's the next Adolf Hitler. He's something like that. Like, you're Hitler. Like, people use that as a different thing. But I'm like, Putin's killed way more people. I'm like, it's all about like we make justifications and claims on stuff, but then like everyone always chalks up to being the worst people in the world as the Nazis, and I'm like, but Unit 731 was a Japanese, basically, it was the Japanese Nazis. They were
Yeah.
vivisecting people. They were cutting them from the bottom up and letting them bleed out like that. They were detaching people's arms and sewing it into the side of their body. I was like, but that's, you look at that and you're like, that's too horrible. That can't happen. I'm like, it's human nature to be horrible, but also there's also human nature to be amazing as well. We are
Yeah, but don't you
constantly
find it
trying.
hard to like navigate? I just can't imagine trying to navigate the world thinking of just like this much kind of corruption all the time in everything you do. Like, oh, I don't know if I should buy that at the shop because I know that in 1970 there was that one conspiracy. But like I mean, like how do you both have all these ideas of these conspiracies and exist in a like functioning in the world?
Well, for me, I don't focus on it. I live knowing these things, but I don't dwell on them all day. I'll still go get a flu shot if I need to get a flu shot. Like, but also, the whole fact is you start surrounding yourself with a bunch of negative influences and conspiracy theories all the time, you're going to dig yourself down into a dark rabbit hole where you're going to feel like the world is corrupt and evil. I hear that and I'm like, no, I also think about the wonderful things about the world too. It's all about whoever has the technology or whoever has the mindset of doing what they're going to do with the tools that they have, the power that they have. The fact that cornflakes was invented originally to prevent masturbation. I hear that. That makes me want to go out and buy a damn bowl of cornflakes. Like you think of that, you're like, what? That can't be true. 1945, Sir Harvey Kellogg invented cornflakes because he thought that people, if they consume too much sugar, their passions would increase. So people would be more likely to masturbate. I was
Wow.
like, what? I was like, you're telling me this bowl of cornflakes I'm eating right now, it leads to that? And then I looked up the original name to the green rooster on the box of cornflakes, and its original name was Corny the rooster. I'm like, excuse me? And his slogan used to be up, up, up with cornflakes, down, down, down with masturbation. I'm like, what is going on right now? Like, you hear those are the ones I have a fascination with. The ones that
Yeah.
the weird like histories, the stuff. Not all
Yeah.
the conspiracies and dark down stuff. I can't focus too much on those a whole lot. Like I can't dive like I can do like an hour in it. But the problem is, like I say, I try and look at the other side too. When I did my series for Fill in the Blank, I was asking people what they were specifically interested in, and they told me I'm interested in industrial revolution, and that's where I learned about the Luddites. And then also, my one
Yeah.
buddy's like, I'm into medical innovations of like sanitation in hospitals. I got interested in a book by Dr. Lindsay Fitzharris. She had a book called The Art of Butchery, and it talked about Joseph Lister and Robert Liston, these people that were amazing innovators for the Victorian era when it came to surgery, where you had to know to be the fastest because you didn't have any anesthetic or whatever that is that
Yeah.
makes you not feel pain. I hear those, I'm like, it's people, we're taking steps. We're constantly on this ever learning, growing process of learning. And that's where I have a fascination with it, because I think people take it where they're going to take it. Shit happens where it's going to happen. I'm not closed off to everything being bad, though. I'm not like just surrounding myself like the world's a terrible place. No, I believe it's awesome. I believe people make it awesome. But I think we choose to, the norm nowadays in society at least, where we choose to let it drag us down and get us in our comfortable zone, where I think we end up really
Mm.
just kind of getting through life, not really trying to be happy in it.
Yeah, I just think it would be difficult to just have all those thoughts about like like all these kind of intense conspiracy theories about pretty much every aspect of your life, and then suddenly going, okay, that's conspiracy theory mode off, and now I'm just gonna be more open. Like, how do you not let that bleed into like your like kind of existence every day?
Because if you tend to worry about things that are happening or tend to worry about too much, you're already conflicting yourself with the biggest problem in life, where people worry about problems that are not immediate. I think when you look at an immediate problem, like I've experienced, two flat tires in 3 different days from each other. I get one tire fixed, my next one goes out because I ran over a nail. I see that, I'm like, I could take this and I could scream at somebody on the middle of the street, but I'm not going to, because this is
Did
just,
someone put the nail there? Like, you sure the government hasn't like put the nail there for you?
I think you're considering me too much of a conspiracy
I'm
theorist for
teasing,
that
no,
one.
teasing.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I was like, all right, this is a problem in my life, but I'm not going to project it out onto someone else. Like, I'm probably one of the only kids of my generation, at least a very few small population, that goes and holds the door open for people and helps people with their groceries and do that. Like, I get all the time elderly people asking me, hey, I didn't expect you to be like that. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, most kids your age would be just completely oblivious or just completely ignorant to helping
Mm,
somebody. And I'm like, well, I wasn't raised that way. I had instilled values from my grandparents. So I learned, like, you get up early in the morning, you go out and experience these types of things. You go and work hard for what you have. You make sure you do everything you do is 110%. But that's my experience and that's my life. I Bruce Lee chalks up to, you literally, God gave you this path because you're the toughest one to walk it. Your problems are your problems. Okay. If you focus on other people's problems and other things that are going on in the world, you're already missing the true aspect of making yourself a better person, which eventually, if everyone focused on making themselves a better person and not hurting anybody else, we would truly be better as people. And then we could slowly work up to building back up the world, building back up. Like, we have to build each other up first. But I'm not a motivational guy, but I'm a big believer in human kindness. I believe it's there, but I believe a lot of people choose to let it go under the rug because
yeah.
they're too overwhelmed with what's going on in life right now.
No, I know what you're saying. I just find it interesting that you can have like such strong beliefs in both of those aspects, that you feel like that you have a certain like way of being as an individual, and yet you still think of these kind of giant, big, like, I don't know how to explain it, but these conspiracy theories that have so many like kind of almost like that you have no real freedom, because if the government has as much power and all these organizations have as much way to kind of influence you, how do you feel like you still have autonomy around the world? I find it really interesting you can balance both these kind of spheres in your life. I just don't know. I don't think I'd be able to do it.
Well, like I said, that's what makes people unique too. The fact that I can do that and not dwell on it. I also have ADHD, so my thoughts are kind of running everywhere at once. Like right now, I'm already thinking about Raisin Bran for some reason. This son smiling, looking at a bowl of cereal. I'm like, why is he smiling at the cereal? Like, my mind takes different routes and different turns. But I think
Yeah.
we all are thinking very, very differently, but we all kind of think the same. We all have a human nature to want to care for one another. I get nervous when, like, I've talked to people that are full on conspiracy like believers, like people that
Mm,
believe 9/11 was an inside job. I was like, I'll try and sit and listen to you, but I don't know, because I was so little at the time. I had no idea what was going on.
yeah.
I didn't understand. You lived in it. You were there and seeing it. And I've talked to people, firefighters that helped out into the thing. Like, they were there helping people get out of the burning buildings and helping
Mm,
these types of things. And they witnessed the thing going in. I'm like, I've heard their real story of being there, then I've seen yours of being on the internet. I'm trying to decipher and trying to understand everybody's point of view here. The fact
mm,
the fact is, we have a Dunbar limit too. We can only remember a certain amount of information or remember a certain amount of faces. But
yeah.
I hear that, I'm like, I'm going to try and damn well understand the world as much as I possibly can by listening to everybody's side. I can't make a justification claim or a thought on anything or make at least a classification on anything if I haven't heard the other side's perspective.
Yeah, no, and I think that's what a lot of like conspiracy theorists like do, like listening to a lot to David Icke's videos and stuff, is that he gives so much information in a period of like, and he does 6 hour videos, right? From start to finish. He'll talk for 6 hours and you end up just kind of like being bombarded with ideas, and he moves so quickly to the next, your brain doesn't have time to catch up. And I kind of think of it as like information dumping. And so that I can see why people can just like hear this all the time and then and like kind of believe it. And I think that it kind of doesn't pause and let you think, and there's not enough. But he'll keep saying, "Oh, it's up to you. You decide what you're gonna take on." And I'm like, you've just talked like 6 hours. Like, how am I even supposed to know what I think if you haven't paused for breath? And so I think it's difficult. Like, that there's all these techniques that these people use, and like, I don't know, hard to explain.
Yeah, I mean, wait, were you saying that I was kind of doing
No,
it?
I didn't mean to imply that. I just mean
Uh,
like the kind of, I don't even know why I brought it up, but the fact that why these conspiracy theories are kind of so effective is because they don't really allow people to look it up themselves. Like, oh, people that talk a lot about it, they don't say, here are some facts, go look it
yeah,
up. And so you kind of hear a lot of stuff and you're like, oh, okay, I don't know.
yeah, they make claims on things, and then like they try and bring up like evidence too and stuff that's not really clear, super clear.
Yeah.
Doesn't have a lot of sources, and I mean I can be at fault at doing that too. But I never try and convince anybody that in full belief of this happening. I only know from like you know. I said, was this a real government project? I go and look it up, and then it's on the CIA's website. But there's a bunch of documents on it, and there's black
Mm,
lines over it. I'm like, this is not a conspiracy theory anymore. This is real shit.
yeah,
But
of course.
also the things I want to be focusing on what's real is I want to know if Bigfoot is real. That's what I don't care about what the Nazis did. Honestly, I just want to know if Bigfoot's real. And the whole idea is like I'm a big fascination with cryptozoology, and I think it brings out mystery, and that's why I think I have a fascination with it because it.
Do you watch those shows? I watch them on American TV where they're like they go into this like quasi archaeology and they're like, we've discovered Bigfoot's bones, and
It's the
they go into a cave and they just
same
find like one bone.
it's the
It's like,
same shit. Like, we're about to lose government funding. Jim Brewer said it best. He goes, "This is a bone of an Australopithecus. Like, it lived 1,500,000 BC." And he's like, "How do you know that?" And he goes, "Because I know." And it's like, and it's like, it's really weird how all that information comes to light. The fact that they're about to lose funding and then they randomly find something, like find a bone, any bone. You know what I mean? That makes sense too. But I look at it and I'm like, I try and give people also the benefit of the doubt, which I think a lot of people don't do anymore. Like I choose to I'll go to a store, grocery store, I'll buy a $2 item. I know exactly what it costs. It costs like 189, but I just tell her keep the change and receipt. And I'll sit behind someone that has like a large amount of items, and I want to see if they'll let me go in front of them. Most of the time they do. Most of the time people realize that they may be in a hurry, but it's not even a second for me to let me go in front of them. And I say
yeah,
thank you, and I'll help them if they need help getting groceries in the car too, because I did that. I get like to give little tests to people sometimes too, like how upset are you really? I've witnessed, and I've been at fault for, I've stopped myself doing it. A woman in 48 items or less, and or not 48 items, that's 12 items or less with 48 items, and she's sitting there, older woman, stacking up her items slowly one at one. It's like, you could easily let me go in front of you. Like, yeah,
mm,
that's not 48 items. But I've witnessed people take out their aggression and pent up rage that's going on in
yeah,
their own life because they're overwhelmed and be an asshole to that woman. And people go around him and go, wow, that guy's an asshole. And then I see that guy and I'm like, coming from a psychology point of view, where I went to school and learned a little bit about mental health, chemical dependency, and these types of things that people get affected by their environment, their genetics. I was like, he's probably going through some shit. Next thing I know, I see that he's got a spare tire on his car, not his real one. He probably got into a little thing where he had to put on an emergency tire and he's just trying to get home. So I understand why he's overwhelmed. He probably has some factors in his life. I think,
yeah. It's nice that I think it's good to have compassion for people, and like especially, I mean, I worked in the service. I worked as a cash register for 5 years, and you get all sorts of people coming through, and you kind of know that they're just using you as an excuse to vent for their day, and they'll just yell at you, and it's got nothing to do with you, but they just needed a little
what do
place
you
to vent, and
what do you
yeah.
think that is from though? Do you think I always chalk it up to like the reason why someone shoots up a grocery store or something is the like people go, oh, it was video games. I'm like, that's not true. I don't think. I mean, they're definitely violent, but I think if you're going to shoot up a store and you play video games, and then you decide after you play video games you're going to shoot up a store right after that,
Yeah, I don't think America's problem is with the video games. I think
yeah, I think we're
every
full.
country has shooting busy video games, and we don't all have shooting. So I think you
Yeah.
got to work out what the limiting factor is there.
Yeah, people say that. They're like, I podcasted with people that are video game like nuts, like geeks they call themselves.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they're like, video games are not violent. If like, and I go, yeah, because if you're going to shoot up a store before you play a game, I mean, or when you're playing a game, then you probably were going to do it before. You know, you don't just randomly play Grand Theft Auto and decide, oh my God, I'm going to go shoot up a store. That'd be awesome right now. But
No,
I
exactly. And if you're going to blame video games, you're going to have to blame films. If you're going to blame films, you're going to have to play music with violent themes. You're going to blame music with violent themes. You're basically blaming all of the media that person gets
Yeah,
experienced,
movies and TV and
including
shit, like, that's
news,
all
right?
has violence in it. You know, I
Yeah,
see
I think it's
Johnny Depp
ridiculous.
swinging from a rope playing Pirates of the Caribbean. I don't think I'm gonna go freaking chop somebody's head off and steal their booty. Like, I'm not gonna do that. But
No, definitely. And I don't think senseless violence in doing exposing yourself to a copious amount of violence, whether it's violent films, but I mean like constantly, it can have an effect on your psychology, definitely.
I think throughout
Then,
history,
yeah.
people look for the most sometimes like they either like they say they look for the really like you were saying the really logical and long interpretation answer, but I feel like the most of the time it's cutting the corners. It's looking for the easiest possible solution. Like, you know, there's people like firefighters saying sometimes we didn't know what caused the fire and we just pointed out to something that's like it was this. It's like, you know, it was that, like that started
Yeah.
the fire. Yeah, it was this, and then just totally back off from it. And I hear that, I'm like, I definitely think people like to take a little bit of shortcuts because it's easier than to go on the long, hard route. That's actually more, I guess, honorable and more kind of
Yeah.
passive towards others, like companies that people get in
I
their
don't think
high
it's just
positions.
shifting the blame. I kind of see the video game thing in America is just shifting the blame from the
Yeah.
guns to
Well,
video games.
it's taking the eye off, like if you really wanted to get to that conspiracy, like taking the eye off of the government. I'm like, but you know, I think that's anywhere. The problem is you're trying to tell people and you're trying to make justifications and rules for a whole society to stand by. Like nobody does the job of being a president, right? Everybody does something or something wrong someone doesn't like. I'm like, you're just shifting blame onto something else so it takes pressure off you. I think that's what people do all the time. And sadly is we're living so structured and we look so much like the gym that works 9 to 5. Like I've podcasted people from Russia and all these people are like, everyone's two-faced here. I'm like, yeah, because we're all displaying a character and we're not showing who we truly are, afraid of hurting somebody or afraid someone's not going to like what we want. And
But I went to America recently. I went to like Los Angeles in the States, and like in Australia, I have no fear of ever being shot. Right? It's just not on my radar. And in America, I had to have this whole new way of thinking. I was almost paranoid. I was like, okay, don't get into any arguments with someone. You know, be careful when you're walking down the street because somebody could just have a gun out and end your life like instantly. I mean, like, can you explain to me why Americans care so much about having the right to carry guns? Like, why is it so important? Not
because
just any guns, fucking like automatic killing 100 people in like 30-second kind of guns. What is with that?
it'd be the same reason I wouldn't want to go to Australia because I feel like everything in Australia can kill you. But then I podcasted with a person from Australia and he told me it's not that relevant that things are going to kill you. He goes, the only things I'm really worried about are sharks and I'm worried about kangaroos. And I'm like, why kangaroos? He goes, because they'll stomp the hell out of you and they'll box you. And then I looked up for 30 minutes boxing videos of kangaroos, people
Yeah,
fighting
but I
kangaroos.
bet no kangaroo has gone to a playground and kickbox like 30 student or 30 kids, right? Okay, like I understand Australia is dangerous like for the wild animals, but I mean like nobody is dying. Like we're not having like 3 mass shootings a day. Like what is with that?
Like I said, Australia you got to look at is a way bigger, at least a way bigger place than America is, and
Spatially.
the problems that where you're focusing on, where you're hearing these types of shootings, are in states. You know, it's like having a bunch of cities. Like states are ridiculous things. Society decided to make a line, and the fact that oh, this is Iowa, and that's another state. Like, that's a whole
Mm,
nother territory. You're diving into that realm. I think the weirdness is that we're getting so much flack and publicity, especially with like our president now, where he sees no publicity as bad publicity, which is
yeah.
understandable. You're still mentioning his name whenever you talk shit on him. But The whole factor is we're under such a watchful eye, like everything, because America has been exposed of a lot of stuff, a lot of problems. So now people are very watchful of them. They know that they're seeing some stuff come out, like the fact that someone used Amazon Alexa in a court case. They found out they're recording even when you're not even talking to Alexa. That makes me not want to have it in my house. But we're being so monitored and such in the eye of news and media nowadays, where it seems like every event we have is bad. That's not true. You're making justifications and claims on people in America that aren't
So
all.
you don't think that there's an issue with the gun control in America at the
I
moment?
never said that. I definitely think there's definitely an issue with people getting guns that shouldn't have guns, but also the same factor is you can get anything like that. That's not just here either. You can get black market weapons and shit in Australia too. You can get black market weapons and stuff anywhere. I think it's all depends on the variety of people you have together. We're in a more small, compact environment. The factor is that
But
we're
we
going
have
to.
cities as well. Like we have pretty dense cities. I
I'm
mean
talking about
Sydney.
country wise.
Well, I don't know. I don't really understand what you're saying. You're saying because America
If you
is
look at
like,
America and see how small it is and see the population numbers there, then take the
yeah.
population numbers for Australia and look how big their continent is.
I mean, what about a more dense? What about India? I mean, India is incredibly dense, right?
And
Country.
India is incredibly, I guess going through poverty. I've talked to people from Guyana and South America, but they don't see violence and hatred there. The reason why is America got a beautiful roll of the dice when we chose where we started at. The fact is
Yeah.
we have so many resources for expanding in technology. We're putting ourselves in debt though because China had the best roll of the cards or roll of the dice. You look, people always kind of compare themselves to another country that's less fortunate. Same factor is everyone compares themselves to Africa because they're less fortunate. They have no food. They eat Haitian mud cookies, which are 90% dirt, 5% butter, and 5% salt, just to keep
Mm.
themselves from starvation. You hear that, and then I talk to a Haitian woman, and she goes, "Those cookies are fucking awesome." I'm like, "What are you talking about? You're eating dirt." She goes, "I ordered dirt to make Haitian mud cookies." I'm like, "What?" Like, you have a burger right down the street. Like, you have that comfortability now. She goes, "It tastes like a snickerdoodle." Then I had one and I was like, I get it. Tastes pretty good. But I look at that and the countries that are less fortunate, all they have in Africa is gold, diamonds, and things that are very, very valuable, but no resource to survive. They can't grow food there. They can't do these types of things. Their animals are completely different from what we have. The same factor
Yeah.
is when I podcasted with my Zach from Australia. He told me I'm not worried about sharks. Like that's a problem, but I'm not worried as much as I'd be worried about a grizzly bear in America. I'm like, but you're also getting a one-sided view of what America looks like. The same fact is if you watch The Simpsons or watch Family Guy and you choose to structure your life like that's what America is, that's not what America is at all.
Yeah, no, I fully understand that. Like, but what I'm asking is like, what? So you think that it's sort of being over exaggerated? Like America's like
I
kind
think
of
depending on
problem with
where you're getting
guns?
information from, if you're not looking at both sides, if you're taking all your information off one source, you're going wrong anyway. If you're making claims
But I
on
don't think
one
that it's
person's
like it's not like these are ambiguous. I mean, these shootings are happening. They are happening, right? Mass shootings,
yeah, but
kind of.
when does the media ever focus on anything good that happens in America? When does that
Yeah,
mean?
but
Yeah, exactly. It's mean world syndrome. The fact that media and all these types of outlets have history has always happened. There's murder in every single country, and you're seeing it prevalent here. I do believe that is happening. I do believe people are becoming more fooled because the problem is we're becoming sensitive in the wrong way. Okay. I do agree with you that it is a problem here. I'm not fighting for America here too, but I'm trying to see it from both sides of the spectrum as well. You know,
I just think that I mean, there's a lot of different countries, and there's a lot of different countries that have the same density. There's a lot of countries that have the same, but not all of us have the same. Not all of our people have the same relationship with guns. I think there's something it must be tied to you guys' idea of freedom, or something weird is happening with the idea that because what happened in Australia is we had a mass shooting, and then the government banned guns, and there's been like 20 years where we've had no mass shooting. So you can't just say that. Like I just feel like just by saying that it's to do with the density, I think you kind of maybe kind of not critiquing the fact that America's relationship with guns is just weird, or there's something that's gone wrong there. I don't
no,
know.
I
Uh,
definitely think it's.
Yeah.
I don't think we should have. I don't think anybody that has reasonable thinking or head on their shoulders understands the power that a gun holds. I used to play Call of Duty thinking it'd be awesome to join the war, and next thing I know, I shot a gun for the first time, and I understood the power behind it. I think a lot of people don't experience that type of realization. I think a lot of people just go full on into things. They charge in head first, and they don't realize the critical thinking behind anything. I do believe that. I do believe America does have a problem with guns, but I'm not the guy that makes the justification or claims to be able to say that you don't deserve guns. Sadly, we're still producing a large amount of guns, even though that everyone in the world could probably own 10 and there'd still be a little bit left over. The same idea, there's always new porn coming out. Like, who's jacked off to every single porn tape in the world? No, you could do that every single day, 100 times a day for the rest of your life, and you would never get through not even a small fraction of the collection. The problem is there is a market for it. There are people
I
that
know,
want.
but I mean, there's a degree of amount. Like, if the government decide, if your government, I mean, we're talking about like simple solutions, and in America, banning guns would be a simple solution, right? Or at least banning automatic rifles or something. I mean, having your kind of rifle to go into farms and shoot animals, one thing. Having the option to have a gun that can shoot hundreds of rounds, like in 5 minutes, like I can't really see the justification of anybody needing a gun like
Well,
that.
that's why they banned automated assault rifles. But the problem is, you can't when you ban automatic rifles and like AR-15s are banned now, like these types of things that are banned in different places.
Yeah,
I'm like, but people are already either grandfathered in with those that they bought them before that law came out. And like I said, that's where I see America just has a shitty fucking foundation with the fact of our laws. The laws are crooked, and the laws don't even make sense sometimes. So I'm like, so the people are grandfathered in. That means those people are going to have assault rifles, and other people are not going to have a chance to get them. But the problem
right. Yeah,
is, there's people that come from other countries. There's people that come from here as well that choose the black market type shit. I'm going to sell these under the table and get my money, get what I need. They need something for themselves, not when they
yeah.
see like, oh, this is just an assault rifle. He's going to do what he wants to do with it. If you ban assault rifles, if a motherfucker's going to get an assault rifle, he's going to go buy an assault rifle. I mean, I don't mean to.
Have those options in Australia. I could go on the black market and buy
Yeah,
assault, but
it's
there's no mass shooting. So what's the difference there between Australia and America? I don't know.
I guess the problems you guys probably face. You guys don't experience a lot of stuff that we're experiencing. We're like I said, we're too compacted as a society. I don't believe you should be living anywhere this close to each other. It's the same fact that China has they do a population control thing because of how many people that live there. It's hard to get a bunch of
Yeah,
people working together in harmony in one place and not have any conflicting views or have any arguments. The sad fact is you're comparing two completely different countries and two different moral values of what we all consider valuable. The fact is, in
yeah. I
Africa,
think it's more to do with the value, not to do with the density, because China's really dense and they're not having mass shootings. I think it's more to do with your attitude towards guns, not the
that
way.
makes sense too, because if you look at China, like if you bump into a person from China in America, they'll bump right into you and not apologize. Where an American bumping into someone you'd apologize for, and the reason why is that's common narrative down there. You don't have to apologize. If there's someone in your way, you can bump into them and move them out of your way because they learned there's so many fucking people there that they have to do
Yeah.
that. Like pushing a
No,
child
I'm
around.
not trying to say America's bad. I'm just saying that from an outside perspective, the gun stuff just does not make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. If I was coming from your perspective or coming from your country and seeing America, and I've never been over here for the first time, I, it would be hard for me to understand, especially looking at like gun laws and all these types of things. But I've also spoken to Bulgarians, Russians, Slovakians, and all these people that come here and work at my work, and they talk about the amazing things they hear about America, land of opportunity, and all they do is
Yeah,
buy a bunch of shit and then go back home and sell it for twice as much. I'm like, because you're in a less economically safe place than America. We're in critical condition with our economy, but it's so easy to make a buck here compared to um like Russia and all these types of places
yeah,
where your money is not worth as much as ours. And I hear that and I'm like, it's all about where you were placed at, where you were made your spot on this earth, where you were born into. It's all about, it's just we got a lucky roll of the dice, and sadly is we're suffering. The problems we make for ourselves are going to keep happening because we choose to make money. We choose the money option over caring about somebody.
yeah. I also think if the government changed and put in some laws against it, like that would definitely help. I mean, that's what happened in Australia. The government changed. The government saw a problem and banned the guns the next day. I mean, the guns were gone, or not that quickly. But I mean, I feel like your government could do that if it wanted to.
Yeah, but the problem is when they ban those guns, there's already so many out here now. There's so many people that have them hidden either in a bunker or whatever the hell you want to believe. And it would just be taking guns from people that are psychologically sound to get guns. But the problem is we don't do testing like that. We just do background
Yeah.
checks. I think there needs to be a mental health check before you go and buy guns.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's so much stuff that could happen. I just and don't get me wrong, I went to America and I really liked it. I'm not like gonna shit all over America. I just the gun stuff from Australian perspective is just mind-boggling and just so sad because like it's just not like in Australia, like if you wanted to go harm someone on the street, you could, and people do it with knives or they do it with axes, and yeah, they might kill one or two people. They just don't have the same range as you can with a gun. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Ups the ante.
I mean, it makes sense. And like I said, I mean, I understand it coming from your perspective as well. And I'm not fighting for America, but I'm also not trying to sit there
Mm,
and say America is to blame for everything. I'm just saying, you know, I look at human human nature. Okay, there's an aspect to want to conquer, and that's constantly been through war. I mean, if you wanted to compare places, you could look at like Genghis Khan or whatever the hell you want to say. Like,
yeah,
the people, there was murder and savagery going on throughout history, but the factor is it's found a new form. It's war, everything. It people say it never changes. It adopts a new form, it adopts a new face, it adopts a new weapon style, it adopt whatever it is. It all adapts to a newer age. And I think that's what's happening in the world today. I see like
yeah,
guns being so easily produced, and the fact that it's just a money aspect. We're cranking them out like McDonald's burgers. And the fact is we don't need to be really doing that, but we always want to be ahead. We always want to prove that we're better than somebody else. And I tell people, humble yourself, be a minority in places that you don't understand what white privilege is. I know what white privilege is. I've experienced it. I work at a place where I'm the only white guy on an all Latino staff. I've been a minority most of my life. I felt like I'd never really fit in, only because of the way I think is a little bit different. I chalk it
yeah.
up to there's two types of people in the world. There's the one type of person that's up in the morning and is able to function with everybody else. Then there's just those people that are considered night owls, or these type of nocturnal people that kind of um, are up at night and don't go out during the day. And a lot of times I've talked to those people, and hell, I can be one of those people. The factor is they feel more comfortable when nobody's out at the grocery store, where they can truly do their shopping at 2 o'clock in the morning. Like the peace
Mm,
I get at being able to go up to the line and not check out without having to wait 45 minutes, and obviously not be able to be associative with such kind of bad negative energy, people just pissed off, like not talking to each other. It's comfortability factor. Some people choose to live their life like that. I say you are who you are, and what you decide to be is whatever road you decide to take in life.
yeah,
I don't know. I'm trying to recover from me trying to fight from America's side, because now I feel like I need to go grill up a couple burgers and immediately start spreading, like, I guess, America on everything. And I'm like, no, I don't think that way. I think there's a hell of
yeah,
a lot of better countries out there that I would love to go visit and love to go experience. But I think it's the same thing with Germany too. Like the whole factor is every time you go over to Germany, they go and tell you like, oh, nice to see you, nice to have you here. We're not like what we used to do. Like that's not us. That's not us. And I hear that and I'm like, they're totally stereotypical now. Like people just immediately think Germany, think Nazis. Like they're never ever
yeah,
going to recover from that. We've put so much implementation and put them in so much debt where they're not even allowed to have nuclear weapons anymore. They're not allowed to have anything. They're not even allowed to have a sufficient army. And we made claims and justifications on them from back in the day, which they couldn't be like now. They realized what they did and they realized what was wrong. But I think it's all about people make justifications and claims on something they truly have never experienced for themselves. Like those people, I don't think are any sort of what they were like back in the day. And even back in the day, there was cases of people that were like, I didn't believe what I was doing, but I had to do it because I feared for my family. Like I said, it's all about understanding and all about listening to other people's experiences to try and decipher through all the shit yourself.
yeah. No, I get that. No, yeah, I like as I said, I really liked America. I just, yeah, at least the gun law stuff, I just don't fully understand. But I mean, I don't really know when I went to America, I didn't really meet anyone that was necessarily pro guns anyway, because I went to a lot of areas that were pretty, like, I guess, progressive. But yeah, I mean, it seems like you've like got a lot out of all the podcasts you're doing and meeting lots of interesting people. It must be a cool way to kind of have new ideas and stuff like that. It's pretty cool.
I think it keeps an open mind to things, and I think
Yeah.
the main problem that we face as people is we just choose to be close-minded and set in our ways. I think you need to be a little bit more open to things. I didn't was able not to understand a lot more and care about people a little bit more only because I was able to podcast with people. I found a
Yeah.
passion in hearing what other people are interested in and just having a conversation. I thought like it was really weird that we were all walking around each other, especially here in America, and just not talking to one another, not even saying hi. And studying mental health and all these types of things, listening to people's stories of depression, that if someone would have just said hello to them, it's not their job to, but it's a moral kindness you should be doing. Like you should
Yeah, no, definitely.
don't
Do you know the musician? I think his name's Daryl Davis. Have you heard of this guy?
it sounds familiar.
He's this jazz musician in America that meets up with Ku Klux Klan members and tries to talk to them and tries to, because he's African American. He was saying, like, how can you hate me when you don't even know me? And he'd basically go find them out, talk to them over a long period of time, and then become friends. And they couldn't be in the KKK anymore. And they actually give him his hoods, and he collects them all. It's really a cool story, and I think that that's just such like a nice way, that by actually sitting down, having conversations with people, like all sorts of people, is a way to try and break down some of those like kind of negative ideas that people have. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, it's all about being rational, just taking the time to get to know somebody for who they are and understand their way of thinking. And, if we just took more time in caring for one another, I think the world, we could build up people again, and we could also build up the world. So I do have a little bit of faith in people, but I think it's going to it always takes something super drastic to happen, like a shooting or a type of terroristic threat where people totally forget about race, totally forget about anything that's different about one another, and they come together to solve this problem. And I don't want it
Mm.
to be like that. I just wish people were more rational in thinking, but people make too much claims and stuff because of how much tension like our country's facing.
Yeah,
Well, you know what?
no, definitely.
I appreciate you being on my podcast. I'm sorry if I seem like a little
It's all
bit of a
right.
nut job. I don't know. I think a lot, and I also like just having conversations with stuff, and I like to see where it goes.
Yeah, no, it's been fun. It was definitely took some wild turns. I didn't know we were going to get to so many conspiracy theories, but it's interesting to talk to people that, I mean, from a religious studies perspective, that's what I said. I love the religions that are a little bit weird, and that's like love in a sense that I love it from a sociological perspective of thinking how people think like that and how they believe it. I don't necessarily believe it myself. That's why my interest is in Scientology. I like Temple of the Jedi. I like Church of All Worlds, which is this cute little American-based religion based on a science fiction religion. It's really adorable. It basically believes. Do you know? There's a science fiction author called Robert Heinlein, and he wrote this book called Stranger in Strange Land about this fictional religion called the Church of All Worlds, and they've based their religion off that religion. I think that's kind of cute.
You mean George
So
Orwell?
I like. Pardon?
The George Orwell guy, the guy that made War of the Worlds?
Uh, War of the Worlds I thought was H.G. Wells, but I might be wrong.
H.G. Wells.
George Orwell did 1989.
I thought it was Orwell's was the one that did War of the Worlds with the giant aliens coming down and stuff, and he did that fake news thing as like a publicity stunt. H.G.
I'm
Wells
pretty
is
sure it was
Yeah, H.G. Wells is a fiction writer, I thought. I think I'm pretty sure it's just George Orwell is the one you're talking about, the one that did the War of the Worlds. Pretty positive.
no, War of the Worlds was H.G. Wells, and George Orwell does 1989.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Oh, yeah.
but
Okay. I got mixed up. 19,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
yeah. Did 1984 George Orwell? Yeah.
Oh yeah, sorry, 1984. 1989 is a bar. 19. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Yeah, you're right.
And I think I think it's fascinating that you have well, at least something like science fiction, like that type of thing. A lot of people just talk it up to Jetsons and flying cars, but like it's cool and idealistic to think where we're going to progress in the future, especially with technology. I think that's awesome that you study things of this sort, and you really analyze historical and like religious stuff too when it comes to your sciences. Like you look at like what was known in history and also what history could become too. I think that's
Yeah, definitely. And what I like about science fiction is that it critiques those things, so that it critiques our idea of progression or critiques our idea of technology and problematizes it, rather than just saying, this kind of idea that everything's good and that just sort of thinking progression equates to something good when it can be so it doesn't necessarily have to be good. And just because these technological advances are happening doesn't mean it's going to be positive. And they almost act as a warning and like a prophecy of going, hang on, like let's take AI to its kind of spookiest level and then see what we think about it. And so we can kind of maybe try and rethink our habits now. And that's what I see science as being able to do.
Yeah, and it's fascination. I have great hopes for the future. I really do. I really hope it becomes something. I would love to have, a teleportation device. But at the same time, I don't like Alexa controlling my toilet. That's a little bit too far for me. When I stop having to do the basic necessities for myself, I start to get a little bit scared. Well, look, I appreciate you coming out
Yep,
onto my
no, definitely. I
podcast,
think the more we can.
Tara. Hello.
No worries. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. It was awesome talking to you. And stay tuned for the next episode of Out of the Blank podcast.